My child, something shifted quietly in a conversation you were never meant to hear, and the surprising part is not simply that the person you love spoke with someone close to you, it is how carefully your name entered the room. There was no dramatic announcement, no rehearsed confession, no moment designed to impress anyone. It began almost casually, with a question that seemed small enough to disappear as quickly as it was asked. Yet the moment the person close to you answered, the entire tone changed. Your person became quieter, more attentive. As if they had suddenly realized they were about to learn something about you that could not be understood from distance alone. And this is where you should listen closely, because what unfolded was not gossip, judgment, or an attempt to expose anything private. It was something far more personal. They wanted to understand you. Not the version of you that smiles when everything is easy. Not the version other people assume they know. They wanted to understand the quieter person underneath it all, the one who thinks deeply, notices small changes, remembers words long after everyone else has forgotten saying them, and sometimes carries feelings without explaining them. Don't skip, because the first thing they discovered may explain why their feelings have been changing in ways even they have struggled to put into words. The person close to you said something simple: you rarely reveal everything you are feeling at once. You tend to watch first. You listen. You notice whether someone's actions match their promises. And when something truly matters to you, you may become quieter rather than louder. Your person did not respond immediately. That silence mattered. Because suddenly, certain memories began connecting in their mind. Moments when they thought your quietness meant distance, moments when they wondered whether you cared less than they did, moments when they could not understand why you stepped back instead of explaining every feeling. And now they were being offered another possibility. What if your silence had never been emptiness? What if it had been observation? What if you were protecting something sincere until you knew it would be treated sincerely in return? The conversation became deeper after that. Your person asked, almost carefully, "Do they always do that?" And the answer surprised them. The person close to you explained that when you care deeply, you do not always make a performance of it. You may show it through consistency, through remembering details, through the way you make space for someone, through the things you quietly notice when nobody thinks you are paying attention. And something inside your person softened. They had been searching for dramatic proof while overlooking the quieter evidence that had been standing in front of them all along. Stay till the end, because this was only the first realization. Another question came next, and this one changed the atmosphere completely. Your person wanted to know whether you had ever spoken about them. There was hesitation on the other side, not because the answer was uncomfortable, but because the truth deserved careful words. Then came a response your person had not expected: yes, you had spoken about them, but not in the way they imagined. You had not reduced them to a simple story of attraction or uncertainty. You had spoken about how their presence made you think differently. How certain conversations stayed with you. How sometimes you wondered whether the connection was trying to teach you patience, honesty, or courage. You had noticed parts of them they assumed nobody saw. Their uncertainty behind confidence. Their kindness in moments that seemed insignificant. The way they sometimes withdrew when something mattered too much. And when your person heard this, they became still. Because people often remember being admired, but being understood reaches somewhere deeper. Something important is waiting for you, because this was the moment the conversation stopped being about whether feelings existed and started becoming about what those feelings actually meant. Your person admitted something they had apparently kept to themselves. They said there were moments when they wanted to reach toward you more openly, yet they worried about misunderstanding your boundaries. They worried that moving too quickly might disturb something that needed time to grow naturally. And the person close to you responded with a sentence that stayed in the air longer than anything else: then don't try to impress them. Just be genuine. Your person almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the answer was so simple compared with all the complicated thoughts they had been carrying. They had been wondering what extraordinary thing they needed to say, what perfect moment they needed to create, what flawless version of themselves they needed to become, and suddenly someone who knew you was telling them that perhaps the most meaningful thing they could offer was consistency. Presence. Honesty without performance. Imagine what that realization does to someone who has spent too much time trying to decode every signal. Suddenly the mystery becomes less about winning another person and more about meeting them clearly. And something else happened here, something quieter but perhaps even more important. Your person asked what makes you pull away emotionally. The answer was not dramatic. You do not need perfection. You do not expect someone to read your mind. But when words repeatedly fail to match actions, you begin to protect your energy. When something feels uncertain for too long, you stop forcing clarity and start watching what naturally reveals itself. Hearing this, your person remembered more than they admitted aloud. There were moments they could have been clearer. Times when they waited for you to make the next move while you may have been waiting for evidence that their intentions were steady. Two people standing near the same doorway, each wondering whether the other would open it. And now, for perhaps the first time, your person could see how easily genuine feelings can become hidden beneath assumptions. Then the conversation took an unexpected turn. The person close to you asked your person a question in return: what exactly do you want from them? No one had prepared them for that. There was no audience to impress. No perfect answer to give. Just a quiet room, an honest question, and your name sitting between them. Your person paused longer than expected. They could have offered something vague. They could have said they were curious, confused, or simply seeing where things might go. Instead, they admitted that what they wanted most was the chance to understand you without all the uncertainty surrounding the connection. They wanted conversations that did not feel guarded. They wanted to know what makes you feel safe enough to be fully yourself. They wanted to know whether the bond they sensed was something you felt too, even if you expressed it differently. And here is where the person close to you noticed something your person may not have realized about themselves. Every answer they gave kept returning to the same idea: not possession, not control, not some impossible promise, but closeness built through understanding. That realization surprised them. Perhaps they had assumed their feelings were driven mainly by attraction or longing, yet when asked to explain what mattered, they spoke about knowing your inner world. Your thoughts. Your trust. Your real voice when you are no longer wondering how you will be received. The room became quiet again. And sometimes silence reveals more than another paragraph ever could. Your person was beginning to understand that the most meaningful discovery from this private conversation was not some hidden secret about you. It was the way their own intentions became clearer while speaking about you. But there was still one thing they had not asked, the question that had been sitting underneath every other question from the beginning. And when they finally found the courage to say it aloud, the person close to you did not answer immediately. Because the truth behind that answer would force your person to look at the connection in an entirely new way. Then came the question neither of them could avoid anymore: do you think they still feel something for me? For a few seconds, the person close to you said nothing, and that silence made your person lean in more carefully than any quick answer could have. There was something about the pause that made the question feel larger than expected, because suddenly this was no longer about curiosity. It was about whether the connection they had been carrying privately existed somewhere inside you too. The answer finally came, but not in the simple form your person had hoped for. I think they feel more than they show, the person close to you said, but they are also paying attention to what you do next. Your person became completely still. Not because those words promised anything, but because they revealed something important. Perhaps you had not closed the door at all. Perhaps you had simply stopped standing there holding it open by yourself. Don't skip, because what happened next changed the direction of the entire conversation. Your person asked what you had been paying attention to, and the response was unexpectedly specific. You notice effort when nobody announces it. You notice who remembers the little things. You notice whether someone appears only when emotions are intense or whether they remain present during ordinary days too. You notice the difference between words that sound beautiful and behavior that quietly proves them. And as your person listened, they began remembering moments they had once considered insignificant. A message they almost sent but erased. A conversation they wanted to continue but allowed to fade. A time they sensed you needed reassurance yet hesitated because they were unsure how much to reveal. None of these memories were dramatic on their own, but together they formed a pattern your person could suddenly see. They had been waiting for certainty while you may have been waiting for consistency. And there is a difference between those two things that can change everything. Certainty asks, tell me exactly where this is going. Consistency asks, can I trust what I am seeing today? Your person had been trying to solve the future while you were quietly observing the present. That realization seemed to land somewhere deep. Stay till the end, because another truth surfaced immediately afterward, and this one was not about anything you had done. It was about your person. The person close to you asked why they had waited so long to speak openly. At first, your person tried to answer lightly. They said timing had been complicated. They said they were trying to understand their own feelings. They said they did not want to assume too much. All of those things may have been true, but the person close to you could sense there was something underneath them. So they asked again, more gently this time, but what were you actually afraid of getting wrong? Your person looked away for a moment. Then they finally admitted it. They were afraid that being fully honest would make the connection feel too real. As long as everything remained slightly unspoken, they could imagine possibilities without risking disappointment. They could tell themselves there would always be another moment, another conversation, another chance to explain what they meant. But saying something genuine would require them to accept that your response mattered to them. And admitting that was harder than they expected. Notice how quietly this changes the story. Sometimes people do not hold back because they feel nothing. Sometimes they hold back because what they feel has become important enough to make them careful. Yet careful can eventually become distant if nobody breaks the pattern. Your person seemed to understand this as they spoke. Something important is waiting for you, because the person close to you then shared an observation they had never intended to reveal. They said there had been a time when your name came up unexpectedly, and your expression changed for only a second. Not sadness. Not excitement exactly. Something softer. As though your mind had instantly traveled somewhere private. You did not say much afterward, but the person close to you remembered that moment because it did not look like indifference. Your person asked when this happened. The details were ordinary, but their reaction was not. They wanted to know what had been said, what you had done next, whether you had asked anything about them afterward. The person close to you smiled and said, "You're asking the wrong question." Your person looked confused. "What should I be asking?" And the answer came quietly, "Why does it matter this much to you?" That question seemed to stop everything. Your person had spent the conversation asking about your thoughts, your reactions, your memories, your feelings, but suddenly attention turned back toward them. Why did one small expression from you matter so much? Why did they remember specific things you had said months later? Why did hearing that you noticed their quieter qualities make them emotional in a way they had not expected? Why had they chosen someone close to you for this conversation in the first place? Slowly, the answer began forming without anyone needing to force it. This connection had become meaningful to them in a way they could no longer reduce to curiosity. They cared about how you saw them. They cared whether you trusted them. They cared whether their presence brought peace or confusion into your life. And that last realization seemed especially important, because your person said something they had never said aloud before: "I don't want to be another uncertainty for them." There was no dramatic promise attached to it. Just a recognition that if they chose to come closer, they wanted to do it differently. Not through mixed signals. Not through guessing games. Not through waiting for the perfect moment that might never arrive. They wanted whatever came next to feel simple enough to be real. The person close to you did not immediately encourage them or tell them exactly what to do. Instead, they asked another unexpected question: if you had one completely honest minute with them, what would you say? Your person smiled nervously and admitted they had imagined that conversation many times. Yet now that they were being asked directly, all the clever words disappeared. What remained was surprisingly simple. They would say they had misunderstood some of your quietness. They would admit they had probably made certain things more complicated than necessary. They would tell you that knowing you had affected them more deeply than they expected. And then they said something even they seemed surprised to hear themselves say. "I would ask whether we could start from honesty instead of assumptions." The room softened after that. There was no need to decorate the sentence. It already carried everything your person had been trying to understand throughout the conversation. But the person close to you still had one piece of information they had not shared. Something you had once said privately, almost in passing, about what would need to happen for you to truly open your heart to someone. Your person had no idea this sentence existed. And when the person close to you finally decided to repeat it, your person's expression changed instantly, because your words sounded far more connected to them than either of them had expected. What they heard next was quieter than a confession, yet somehow it carried more weight than anything dramatic ever could. You had once said that the person who truly reaches your heart would not have to chase perfection. They would simply have to make you feel that you could stop guessing. That was it. No impossible standard. No grand condition. just clarity. Steadiness. The feeling that you would not need to interpret every silence, question every change in tone, or wonder whether sincerity would disappear the moment things became emotionally real. Your person looked down when those words were repeated, because they seemed to recognize themselves somewhere inside them. Not as the perfect answer, but perhaps as someone who had finally understood where they had been going wrong. They had spent so much time wondering what enormous gesture might prove how much they cared, yet the truth was much simpler. What you might have needed was not intensity. It was reliability. Not another unforgettable moment, but enough ordinary moments that your heart could stop preparing for uncertainty. Don't skip. Because this is where the private conversation became far more revealing than your person expected. The person close to you explained that you are not difficult to understand when someone truly pays attention. You respond to sincerity. You remember consistency. You notice when someone listens without immediately turning the conversation back toward themselves. And most importantly, you notice when someone makes you feel safe enough to be honest without needing to carefully package every emotion. Your person listened differently now. Earlier, they had been gathering information about you. Now they were examining themselves. There is a moment in certain conversations when curiosity becomes responsibility, when someone realizes that knowing another person more deeply also means asking whether they are prepared to treat that knowledge with care. Your person seemed to reach that moment. They asked, "Have I made them feel uncertain?" The person close to you did not rush to answer. They chose their words carefully. "Sometimes," they said, "but I don't think they decided that means you don't care. I think they just stopped trying to answer questions that only you can answer." Your person exhaled slowly. That sentence appeared to settle something inside them. Perhaps they had imagined you sitting somewhere interpreting every move, waiting endlessly for clarity. But now they were being shown something different. You had continued living, continued growing, continued becoming more grounded in yourself. You had not frozen your world around the connection. And strangely, that made your person respect you even more. Stay till the end, because the next thing they asked revealed something about the way they had been thinking about you in private. Do they ever wonder what would have happened if we had just been more honest from the beginning? The person close to you smiled slightly, almost as if they had been expecting that question. They said you had never used those exact words, but there were moments when you spoke about timing, missed opportunities, and the strange way two people can care about each other while still misunderstanding one another. You had once said that sometimes the problem is not a lack of feeling. It is two people waiting for certainty from each other at the same time. Your person gave a small, almost disbelieving laugh when they heard that. That sounds exactly like us, they admitted. And suddenly the conversation felt less like discovering a secret and more like discovering a mirror. Both of you may have been standing on different sides of the same uncertainty, each believing the other held information you did not have. Your person thought your quietness meant hesitation. You may have interpreted their hesitation as a lack of direction. Each waited for something undeniable while the most meaningful signals remained subtle. The realization was almost painfully simple, but not negative. In fact, there was something hopeful about it, because misunderstandings are different from incompatibility. A misunderstanding can change the moment two people begin speaking clearly. Something important is waiting for you. Because the person close to you then asked your person whether they were looking for reassurance or whether they were actually prepared to change the way they communicated with you. That question caught them off guard. It was easy to want confirmation that you cared. It was harder to ask whether they were ready to create the kind of connection where you would never need to hide what you cared about. Your person sat quietly with that distinction. Then they answered with surprising calmness. I think I'm tired of trying to figure out what they're thinking from a distance. The person close to you responded, then maybe stop trying to solve them and start talking to them. Nothing about that advice was mysterious. Perhaps that was exactly why it landed so deeply. Your person had spent so much time searching for hidden meaning that they had almost forgotten the simplest form of connection. Asking, listening, answering honestly, allowing another human being to respond without scripting the outcome in advance. They admitted that part of them had imagined needing the perfect opening line. Something memorable. Something that would instantly explain everything. But the longer the conversation continued, the more they understood that real closeness might begin with something much smaller. Can we talk? I've been thinking about something. I think I misunderstood you. Simple words can carry enormous meaning when someone finally stops hiding behind complexity. Then something almost tender happened. The person close to you asked what your person admired most about you, and unlike earlier questions, this one did not make them hesitate. They answered immediately. They said you have a way of making people feel noticed without trying to become the center of attention. They said you sometimes understand the mood of a room before anyone speaks. They admired that you could care deeply while still protecting your dignity. They admired the way you continued moving forward even when you did not have every answer. And then, after a pause, they admitted something more personal. They make me want to be clearer about who I am. That sentence changed the energy again. Because admiration is one thing, but when someone makes you want to become more honest with yourself, the connection begins touching deeper places. The person close to you noticed this too. They asked, do you realize you haven't talked about what you want from them nearly as much as you've talked about who you want to become around them? Your person went quiet. They had not realized it. Yet now that it had been pointed out, they could not ignore it. Perhaps the conversation had started because they wanted answers about you, but somewhere along the way it became a conversation about their own readiness. Were they ready to stop hiding behind ambiguity? Ready to communicate without trying to control the response? Ready to let the connection be real enough that it could develop naturally rather than existing mostly inside imagination? These questions did not make them retreat. They seemed to steady them. And this is where the most surprising part unfolded. The person close to you finally shared something you had said recently, not a declaration, not a promise, but a quiet reflection. You had said that you were no longer interested in forcing anything into place. If someone wanted to know you, they could come closer honestly. If someone needed distance, you would respect it. If a connection was genuine, you believed it should eventually become clearer rather than more confusing. Your person listened to every word. Then they asked only one thing, did they say that because of me? The answer was careful. Maybe partly. But I think they said it because they've changed. And that response affected your person differently than a simple yes ever could have. Because suddenly they understood that you were not waiting to be chosen. You had begun choosing the kind of emotional environment you wanted around you. Peace over guessing. Mutual effort over one-sided pursuit. Clarity over endless interpretation. And rather than pushing your person away, that realization seemed to draw them into deeper reflection. They said quietly, "Then if I speak to them, I need to mean what I say." The person close to you nodded. No performance. No dramatic declaration built for one moment. Just truth that could still make sense the next morning. Your person seemed almost relieved by that idea. Maybe sincerity did not need to be impressive. Maybe it only needed to be consistent. Yet there was still one thing left unsaid, and your person could feel it. The person close to you had been holding back a detail from earlier in the conversation, something connected to a question you had once asked about your person when you believed nobody would ever repeat it. It was a very simple question, but the reason you asked it revealed more than the words themselves. Your person noticed the hesitation and said, "There's something else, isn't there?" This time the answer came with a small smile. "Yes. But I'm not sure you understand what it means yet." And when they finally repeated the question you had once asked about your person, the entire conversation suddenly became much more personal than either of them had expected.